Hi, hello, I'm down at 14 and welcome to Before the Crowd. I am your friendly neighborhood Zambian Ute, and today I have a couple of crazy clips for you that I want you to hear and tell me what you think, and we'll break them down and give you some commentary. But this relates to me as a Zambian, and I wonder how the rest of Africans and African Americans and people in the African diaspora around the world really feel about it.
Breaking news. White men should recolonize Africa, says war criminal Eric Prince. He claims they can't govern themselves. Keep in mind, he is currently being investigated for being a part of several coups that overthrew meaningful governments in Africa.
Then it's time for us to put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens, because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris, instead of actually making their country a better
People on the left
land.
are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes.
Whew. Okay. We heard from Eric Prince. Eric Prince basically is supposed to be an American, what do you call it? Private military guy. He has his own little private army for American interests, if you get my drift. But I want you to pay attention to the fact that in this modern world where everybody is privy to information, there exists people who frivolently believe that just because of a certain country, a certain background, a certain race, they are allowed to impede on people's freedoms of choice and being. And like it or not, him saying that America or people of white descent should wear their imperialist hats back on means there are a lot of people with a lot of similar ideas. And trust me, 50 something, 60 something years ago isn't a long enough time for a lot of people to want to forget racism, colonialism, and the simple fact of barbarism that the Caucasoid people have inflicted on more than a third of the world. I need people to recognize this for what it really is. It's people who come together in their little cult-like clubs, Cooklacks, whatever, knickknacks, Billy Joe listening, Kentucky Fried Chicken loving cult clubs. It is just the same thing. First they did it in secret for a couple years when they realized people are watching. Now they want to do it in the open. Eric Prince isn't the only one spreading this rhetoric and message. Trust me, there are a lot of people. And the sad part is that it's not only in America. Even the British Isles have their own version of Eric Prince. And at some certain point you have to realize they're allowed to want to be patriotic of their own homes. They are, but they also need to realize they should keep that shit on their isles. For so long, African people or people of a certain shade have had to worry and play at the game of the white man. Economically speaking, the markets around the world are set up in a way to keep people of a darker shade down. This is not rhetoric. I am not trying to hype up people. I'm just simply speaking truths that a lot of us have recognized. And people have had to jump those hoops to make a gain and do 3 times much more work than the white man will ever have to do in his life because of generational wealth. We know that. It's simple. It's simple truth. Trust me, there is more I could speak about here, but the sad fact is that every youth and grown-up out there knows this. We've had to fight so hard to simply see representation on TV, in work, and simple living. What's up for Africans who haven't been able to climb out of the hoops and barriers they put in our own continent for us? Apparently, highlight France, Belgium, even the simple Americas, and Britain too. But it's the truth. We have to fight for ourselves. We have to do the work for ourselves. Okay, I'm going to show you another clip, and if it hasn't sunk in yet, you're going to hear it for yourself, and it will click. There are like 5 more.
If you've been on TikTok for a while, you must have heard about a ton of Africans telling you that Europeans stole Africa's resources. Now, there's a lot to say about that. First and foremost, most of these resources are still in Africa, and they're not being stolen by Europeans. They're actually being sold to Europeans by the African state leadership. Your own elites are robbing you. It's not us doing it, not anymore. The real issue, of course, is why aren't Africans using their own resources to do things? Why does Mr. Beast have to go to Kenya to build water wells? Why didn't the Kenyan government do it themselves? I suppose the Kenyan government could have done it themselves. They just chose not to do it. Nigeria is now a country of almost 220 million people, the largest country in Africa. But they only produce about 10% of the electricity that a small country like Hungary. Hungary only has 10 million people, but they produce 10 times as much electricity as Nigeria does. I mean, I know you want to have your Wakanda, right? But do you expect white people to give it to you? No, you're supposed to build it yourself. Having said all this, it is of course obvious that we Europeans in the north need to prepare for a possible, potential African rise in terms of technology and therefore also in terms of military capacity. And that means we in Europe need to already start looking ahead and thinking ahead about how we are going to win the war against Africa, because there will be a future war between Europe and Africa.
I love how he goes, Europeans aren't stealing your resources anymore. It's your own elite people who do it now. Our own people do it right now because they're funded and coerced by, and even blackmailed by, the European elitists. You people, when the Queen was around and alive, she would go on her own national television wearing jewelry made out of minerals that were ransacked from the continent of Africa and Asia. You think we don't know that? We know our own history. We know you've tried hard enough to make sure that we are subservient and can just play along to your weird rhetorics. We've seen it. We know how hard white people try to make 50 to 60 years look like such a long time. It's not. It has never been. There are people still dealing with the fact that you and your ancestors don't like other people. You just don't know how to stay alone and cope and be by yourselves. You try your hardest to intervene because of some self-righteous need to be saviors. We don't get it, but that's just who you are. We are not yet done. Run another clip.
Africa, where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap.
Growing up, little down at 14, always asked why life on TV looked so good. And trust me, every kid who grew up, and I'm pretty sure I have mentioned this, any kid who grew up in Zambia around maybe 2005 to 2015 had a DSTV or free to air. If you had a free to air first, you saw life with like 3-4 standards of living. You had SABC 1, SABC 2, SABC 3, and ETV. See? So now, SABC 1 gave you that real nice African blend of mixed culture. You'd see a little bit of white people, you'd see a little bit of dark people, you'd see a couple of Indian people, but it was well assimilated. But you asked why. And it was somewhat of the same with the rest of these other two, except SABC 3. That was completely Afrikaans, right? Now, I was Zambian. I barely used to see white people. Occasionally, I would see a couple Asian people here and there. But I always asked why. Why was life so good on TV? And then slowly it starts to sink in. Because you see it on news clips. You see it on a tiny bit of TV shows, documentaries. Africa is a vastly blessed continent. But its resources aren't used in Africa. Africa is purposely left to be a stepping stool for other, well, you get it. And that always sucked because you'd hear of these innovations and people with great ideas coming from Africa. You hear of the Mansa Musas in the world. You hear of those little African kids who were able to turn turbine engines into an electrical source for their households, turn CDs into solar panels way before anybody else did. And that was so inspiring. And then you wake up to the reality that the rest of the world doesn't want you to have that good of a life and help people in your neighborhood because it doesn't sit well with them. Every system, company you know and love is in some way built to make you feel like shit. And that sucks. It doesn't help. And then you start to hate yourself and you hate your people, and then you turn to some sense of alleviation, be it drugs, be it girls, be it fashion, be it entertainment, or be it the internet, because that's what they want. It's what they like. It's how they work. And if you're a Zambian, what the hell? Why is English so hard? And if you're a Zambian, this next clip is going to resonate with you so well, because just listen and you understand a couple of things.
That just last year, 600 Chinese businesses invested in Zambia. They poured in some $3 billion. 600 companies, $3 billion. And China is not the only one interested in Zambia's resources. The European Union is planning to bid for mines as well. The G7 wants to build a railway line in the country. Zambia is in the middle of a bidding war. And that means there's a lot of money involved. The scope for corruption is huge. Countries like these need to stay vigilant. They must oversee leases and sales involving crucial natural resources because no one should be allowed to exploit a country for one Mercedes-Benz.